Let's start reading the next part of the lesson, page number 11. I'm going to read out the last pair of this page for you. So, look into your books and listen carefully. So, you cannot imagine, dearest Connie, my feelings as I looked into the eyes of Fritz officer, who approached me, outstretched. Hans Wolf, he said, gripping my hand warmly and holding it. I'm from Düsseldorf. I play the cello in the orchestra. Happy Christmas. So, as we had read that they both teams, both soldier soldiers of the country like Germans and Tommies were celebrating Christmas. So the both the captains were standing there and started their conversations of how they have introduced themselves. So he expressed how he felt in that moment is far beyond that can be expressed in words of imagined. Right, he was overwhelmed as he looked straight in the eyes of the approaching German officer who extended his hands. Outstretched, extended. Right, his hands introduced himself. His name was Hans Wolf, and he belonged to a place named Düsseldorf. He told Jim that he played cello. It is a kind of musical instrument, right, at the orchestra, and then wished him happy Christmas. Now turn the page. Page number 12. At the beginning of the page, Captain Jim McPherson, I replied, and a happy Christmas to you too. I'm a school teacher from Dorset in the west of England. Right? So, Jim wished him back. Jim, the writer of the letter, and introduced himself too by telling his full name, Captain Jim McPherson. He told the German officer that he was a school teacher in Dorset, which is in the west of England. All right, so look at the next para carefully. Ah, Dorset, he smiled. I know this place. I know it very well. We shared my rum ration and his excellent sausages. And we talked, Connie. How we talked! He spoke almost perfect English. But it turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset, never even been to England. He had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. His favorite book, Far from the Madding Crowd. So out there in no man's land, we talked of Bathsheba and Gabriel Oak and Sergeant Troy and Dorset. So, as they were talking to each other, so Hans expressed delightfulness upon hearing about Dorset. He revealed that he knew the place quite well, but it turned out that he had never visited this place or any other in England. He knew so much about England and all from school or English books that he read. Jim mentioned how they shared his quota of rum and Hans sausage. Jim's excitement about their conversation was clear from the letter. He revealed that they talked about Hans' favorite author, Thomas Hardy, and his book, Far from the Meddling Crowd. He talked told Connie how they talked about the characters of the book, like Bathsheba, Gabriel Oak, and Sergeant Troy. They talked about each other's family. He had a wife and one son, born just 6 months ago. As I looked about me, there were huddles of khaki and grey everywhere, all over no man's land. Smoking, laughing, talking, drinking, eating. Hans Wolf and I shared what was left of your wonderful Christmas cake, Connie. He thought the marzipan was the best he had ever tasted. I agreed. We agreed about everything, and he was my enemy. There never was a Christmas party like it, Connie. So they talked about the families. Hans too was married with a 6 months old son. They even shared the leftover cake that Jim's wife had made. Hans loved the marzipan and expressed it was the best he had ever had. Jim was of the same opinion. Jim mentioned how they both agreed on everything despite being each other's enemy. Germany and Britain was at war at that time. He told how he looked at the no man's land and could see men in grey and khaki enjoying themselves. They were smoking, eating, laughing, drinking, and most of all celebrating. Jim mentioned how it was a very unique Christmas party, means both the enemy soldiers were, yes, they were enjoying together. So it was a unique party. Then someone, I don't know who, brought out a football. Great cords were dumped in piles to make goalposts, and the next thing we knew it was Tommy against Fritz out in the middle of no man's land. Hans Wolf and I looked on and cheered, clapping our hands and stamping our feet to keep out the cold as much as anything. There was a moment when I noticed our breaths mingling in the air between us. He saw it too and smiled. Jim McPherson, he said after a while, I think this is how we should resolve this war. A football match. No one dies in a football match. No children are orphaned. No wives become widows. Then he added in the conversation that someone who he didn't know brought out a football, and next they knew they were having a football match in the midst of no man's land. They used great cords to make the goalpost. Hans and Jim only watched and cheered for the team. They clapped and stamped their feet to keep themselves warm also. Jim could even notice their breaths mixed up in the air. Hans noticed it too, and they both smiled at each other. After a while, Hans said that this is exactly how the dispute should be resolved and not by war. In a football match, no one loses their life, no children were orphaned, and no wives become widows. I would prefer cricket, I told him. Then we Tommies could be sure of winning, probably. We laughed at Chad that, and together we watched the game. Sad to say, Connie Fritz won, 2 goals to 1. But as Hans Wolf generously said, our goal was wider than theirs, so it wasn't quite fair. In the picture, you can see they both were playing. So Jim replied to Hans' ideas of resolving it with football by saying that he would rather suggest cricket because then there would be more chances of the Tommies winning. They both had a good laugh. Sadly, Jim informed that Fritz won the game by 2 goals to 1. Hans, generous as he was, remarked that it was because their goal was wider than that of Tommy's, which was a bit unfair. Page number 13, second para. The time came, and all too soon, when the game was finished. The snaps and the rum and the sausages had long since run out, and we knew it was all over. I wished Hans well and told him I hoped he would see his family again soon, that the fighting would end and we could all go home. So it was the ending time. They ran out of all the snacks. The game was finished sooner than they realized. It all came to an end. Jim gave Hans his best wishes and conveyed how he hoped for things to end soon and end well so that they could all go home and reunite with their families, because it is the dream of every soldier that he could visit her family positively. So I think that is what every soldier wants on both sides. Hans Wolf said, take care, Jim McPherson. I shall never forget this moment, nor you. He saluted and walked away from me slowly, unwillingly, I felt. He turned to wave just once and then became one of the hundreds of grey-coated men drifting back towards their trenches. So, what happened? And Hans replied by saying that reuniting with their families and for things to end well is something that every soldier wanted. He then wished Jim well and expressed that he should always remember that day, and so should Jim's. Hans went away after saluting in a slow pace and turned back only once to wave. Jim felt as if Hans was walking unwillingly, but soon he was one of the grey-coated men who moved back to their trenches. That night, back in our dugouts, we heard them singing a carol and singing it quite beautifully. It was still night, silent night. Our boys gave them a rousing chorus of wild shepherd washed. We exchanged carols for a while and then we all fell silent. We had had our time of peace and goodwill. At time I will treasure as long as I live. Dug out a shelter for soldiers made by digging a hole in the ground and covering it. So, as soon as they went back to their dugout shelters, they could hear the Germans singing a carol very melodiously. They sang Silent Night, then Silent Night, the title of the song. Then the Tommies sang White Shepherds Washed, right? Title of the song. Just like this, they exchanged carols that night, and after a while, they were all silent. Jim called it the time of peace and goodwill and said how he would cherish it forever, right? So, they both teams have their good time. Next page, page number 14. Dearest Connie, by Christmas time next year, the war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. I know from all that happened today how much both armies long for peace. We shall be together again soon, I'm sure of it. Your loving Jim. So, after telling her about the amazing Christmas night, Jim told Connie that things will settle soon and by next Christmas, the war would just be a distant memory. He told her that his experience with them had made him realize how both the sides craved for peace. He assured her that they would be reuniting soon. He then signed off. So, here is the end of the part 2.